Mom said, "You should share what you earn," so I shared her name with the tax office. My name is Brooklyn. I'm 57 years old, and the day my mother tried to force her way into my finances was the day I realized I had been living inside her lies far longer than I ever understood. She showed up at my door demanding access to my business account, shouting that a good daughter shares what she earns. But when she stormed out, she left behind something she never meant for me to, a government envelope marked "Final Warning." That single forgotten letter told me everything. That my mother wasn't trying to share my income. She was trying to escape an investigation she'd been hiding for years. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I had to do. If she wanted sharing, then I would share something she never expected, her name, with the tax office. And I can still recall the exact moment my mother, Gloria, looked me straight in the eyes and told me I owed her. Not emotionally, not symbolically, financially. She said it with a smug certainty, like she was reciting a universal law everyone else somehow already knew. You should share everything you earn, Brooklyn. That's what good daughters do. It happened on a humid Thursday afternoon, the kind where the air feels thick enough to chew. I had just gotten home from work, still wearing my name badge from the small logistics company where I'd been grinding away for over 2 decades. I'd finally earned a minor promotion. Not a huge one, nothing glamorous, but enough to slightly ease the constant, tight grip of bills around my neck. I had been proud of myself, quietly so, the way you get when you're used to celebrating alone. But my pride evaporated the instant I saw my mother sitting on my porch chair like she owned it. Gloria had always had a talent for appearing at moments when things were going well for me. Some people break into dance when good news arrives. Gloria breaks into intrusion. She didn't even congratulate me. She simply said, "So, I heard you're moving up." I don't know how she heard. I certainly hadn't told her. With Gloria, there are always invisible channels. A cousin she pumps for information, a neighbor she's charmed, a family friend she manipulates with selective tears. However she found out, she wore the news like it belonged to her. That was how it had always been with her. If I scraped my way to something, she assumed she deserved a slice of the pie. Never mind that she never helped me build the pie. Never mind that she criticized every decision I made along the way. And never mind that she hadn't spoken to me in weeks until that moment. She leaned forward, folding her hands over her purse like she was negotiating a business deal. "I think," she said, "it's time you start sharing what you earn. You know I raised you. You wouldn't have a job if it weren't for me giving you life." That line, giving me life, was one she wielded like a weapon. A phrase she polished for guilt and kept ready in her arsenal. I had heard it so many times that the words barely stung anymore. Barely. I calmly explained that I couldn't afford to give her money. My promotion added just enough to finally allow me breathing space, to buy fresh groceries without calculating each item, to repair my leaky faucet, maybe even to start a modest emergency fund. I had worked decades for that small sliver of stability. But Gloria had always seen my boundaries as invitations to push harder. When I told her no, she blinked at me, like she couldn't comprehend the meaning of the word. "You're telling me you can't spare a little from your check for your own mother?" she demanded. I repeated myself. She repeated her guilt, and when guilt didn't work, she escalated. By the end of that week, she had already told half the extended family that I was selfish and greedy. I received a message from my Aunt Ramona saying she never expected this kind of heartlessness from me. A cousin I barely spoke to sent a thinly veiled accusation disguised as concern. "Is everything okay with you? Your mom said you're refusing to help her even though she's struggling." Struggling? Gloria had never mentioned anything about struggling. What she wanted was access. To my money, my bank account, and my accomplishments she felt belonged to her. I tried setting boundaries, clear ones. I told her I wouldn't discuss money. I told her I needed space. I told her I would not be manipulated emotionally, financially, or otherwise. She treated each boundary like a speed bump she could glide over without slowing down. Then, 1 week later, just as I was convincing myself that maybe she'd get bored and back off, there was a knock at my door. A sharp, urgent, intentional knock. I opened it, and there she was again. This time she wasn't sitting casually or posturing with vague entitlement. She looked determined, almost triumphant. In her hands was a manila folder, thick, stuffed, and ominous. She held it out to me like it was a gift or a trap. "Sign these," she said, her tone clipped, rehearsed, and startlingly confident. Before I could even process the command, she added, "This will make everything easier for both of us." And that was when I realized whatever was inside that folder was going to change everything. I hadn't even opened the folder yet, but I already knew it wasn't going to be good. When I finally opened the manila folder my mother handed me, I felt the kind of dread you get when you know something is wrong, long before your eyes confirm it. Inside were neatly printed documents, forms, agreements, and signature pages clipped together with a metal fastener. At first glance, they looked official, maybe even legitimate. But when I saw my own business name at the top of the first page, my stomach tightened hard and fast. She wanted to become a joint. Owner of my small business account. Not a supporter, not a consultant, not someone listed for emergency contact. A joint owner. Equal access, equal authority, equal control. The kind of legal partnership that could unravel everything I had spent years building with sweat, insomnia, and stubborn survival. I stared at the document, speechless. My mother, of course, filled the silence instantly. "I know what's best for you financially," Gloria said, her voice annoyingly calm, as though she were explaining a recipe to a child. "I can help you manage things. You're not getting any younger, Brooklyn. Who's going to look after your accounts if something happens to you?" I could hardly form a sentence. "You want access to my business funds?" She rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. "It's not access, it's responsibility. I'd just be helping. We'd be partners." Partners. She said it like it was a gift, but what she really wanted was control, the kind she never had over her own life and now wanted to siphon from mine. I read through the fine print, my heart hammering harder with every paragraph. The agreement would legally bind me to her financial activity. It wasn't accidental oversight, it was intentional entanglement. When I told her absolutely not, Gloria's face snapped into an expression I knew far too well, the beginning of an emotional tirade. "I cannot believe you," she hissed. "After everything I've done for you. This is how you repay me? By treating me like some outsider?" "You are an outsider when it comes to my finances," I said. It came out steadier than I expected. That made her furious. She began raising her voice, talking over me, telling me I was being selfish, dramatic, paranoid, disrespectful. She insisted the paperwork was normal, insisted she was only trying to help, insisted I was imagining danger where there was none. But I've learned something over the years. When someone insists repeatedly that something is normal, it usually isn't. Her meltdown crescendoed into a full performance. She claimed she needed the partnership to protect me, to support me, even to watch my back. Each excuse was worse than the last, and none of them made sense. Then she said something that chilled me more than the folder itself. "Well, everyone already knows I'm joining the business. They're happy for us." I blinked at her. "What do you mean, everyone?" She hesitated, only for a second, but long enough, and then she tried to cover it up. "I just mentioned it. They all said it makes perfect sense." I could practically hear the gears grinding in my mind. My mother, without a conversation, without my consent, had been telling our extended family, her friends, and who knows who else that she was becoming a partner in my... This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't new. She'd been planning, and it wasn't the first time she had used paperwork to maneuver herself into someone else's affairs. I remembered moments I had pushed away. The time she added herself as an authorized user on my aunt's credit card without permission. The time she signed a lease under my cousin's name. The way she'd always collected documents and signatures like trophies she could wield later. Suddenly, something clicked in my mind. A quiet, creeping suspicion I had been avoiding for years. What legal trouble was my mother in? She had a habit of acting invincible, but her behavior lately, the pushiness, the entitlement, the urgency, it all smelled like desperation. Financial desperation. The kind people hide until the walls start to close in. After she left, still fuming and accusing me of betrayal, I let the house fall into silence. Then I gathered every document she had brought, placed them on my dining table, and took a photo of each page. I needed clarity, and I needed it quietly. I wasn't going to confront her again, not until I understood exactly what she was trying to drag me into. The next morning, I began digging, looking up the implications of joint partnerships, searching for common scams involving parents and adult children, trying to understand how legally vulnerable I might already be. That was when I noticed something small, almost trivial, tucked underneath the folder she had given me. A single piece of her mail. Probably slipped in by accident, or dropped, or forgotten in her rush to push the partnership papers at me. It was addressed to her. But the sender's name froze me cold. It was from a government office, and not the friendly kind. The return address alone told me that whatever Gloria was hiding was far worse than I imagined. The envelope I found under the folder wasn't thick, but it felt heavy in my hands, heavy with implication, heavy with the kind of consequences people spend their lives dodging until they no longer can. I stared at the return address again, the stark government initials printed in bold. I had no intention of opening my mother's mail, but something in my gut insisted I needed to know what was inside. When the person who's trying to access your accounts accidentally drops an envelope like that in your home, you pay attention. I slipped a finger under the seal and pulled out the documents. Inside were 3 letters, all stamped with the same increasingly alarming phrases: overdue notice, final warning, and immediate response required. They were addressed to Gloria, dated across the past 2 years, and each one outlined unpaid taxes that had spiraled far beyond manageable fees. My mother hadn't missed 1 year. She had missed several. The amounts were staggering, not in the tens or hundreds, but in the thousands. Penalties piled on penalties, interest compounding month after month. It wasn't just a slip-up. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was avoidance, willful, prolonged avoidance. And suddenly, everything clicked. My mother's insistence that I share what I earn, her push to become a joint owner, her eagerness to attach herself to anything with my name on it, her sudden appearances, her desperation disguised as entitlement. This wasn't about fairness, motherhood, tradition, or familial gratitude. This was desperation. I sat down at my kitchen table, the letters spread in front of me like evidence in a case I never wanted to be part of. Every memory of her behavior ran through my mind like a reel. Small moments I'd brushed off, things I'd shrugged away. The pieces were forming a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't unsee. I needed clarity, the kind that only a professional could give. So I made an appointment with my accountant, a calm, meticulous man named Russell, who had helped me straighten my cluttered finances years ago. When I slid the letters across his desk, his eyebrows lifted slightly, but he didn't look surprised. He'd dealt with enough human messes to recognize the pattern. "Brooklyn," he said carefully, "if these are connected to her and she somehow gains joint access to your business accounts, there could be complications." "Complications?" I asked, though I already feared the answer. He folded his hands. "If funds mix, even unintentionally, investigators might see it as shared liability. They may assume shared financial activity. That could pull you into whatever she's involved in." My chest tightened, but I didn't sign anything. "That's good. Legally, you're still separate, but you must be extremely cautious. People in debt, especially severe debt, often look for a financial lifeline, sometimes without being honest about why." I didn't need him to say the part lingering unspoken. "Your mother was trying to use you." Fury rose up in me, not loud, not dramatic, but a quiet, burning anger that had been building for decades. Gloria wasn't just irresponsible. She was reckless enough to entangle me in her problems without a second thought. It wasn't new behavior, not really. I remembered being 8 years old when she borrowed money from a neighbor in my name, telling them it was for school supplies, then never paying them back. I remembered her letting a bill go unpaid under my address because she didn't like the company's tone. I remembered her secretly using my information for a magazine subscription she never intended to pay. All small things, too small to report, too strange to explain, too uncomfortable to confront. But this was different. This was dangerous. Armed with knowledge and exhaustion, I drove straight to her house. I didn't call first. She wouldn't have answered anyway. When she opened the door, she greeted me with irritation, like I was the one disturbing her peace. "We need to talk," I said, pushing past her into the living room. She huffed dramatically. "What now? Are you here? To apologize for your attitude?" Instead, I laid the tax notices on her coffee table. Explain this. Her expression faltered, only for a flicker of a second, before she plastered on a dismissive smile. Oh, those? They exaggerate everything. You know how the government is, always trying to scare people. I stared at her. Years of unpaid taxes isn't an exaggeration. She crossed her arms. You shouldn't be snooping in my mail. It fell out of the folder you shoved at me. Her eyes hardened. So now you're spying on me? I felt something inside me snap into place, a boundary locked into concrete after years of wobbling. You tried to get access to my business account. You tried to make me legally tied to this mess. You didn't tell me anything. She stepped closer, her voice low and venomous. I am your mother. I deserve support. And if you won't give it willingly... She paused, her tone shifting into something colder, deliberate. I'll take what I deserve one way or another. In that moment, I realized my mother wasn't just desperate. She was dangerous. I didn't think anything could surprise me anymore when it came to my mother. After discovering her unpaid taxes, after realizing she wanted to drag me into her financial mess, after hearing her threaten to take what she deserved, I thought I had finally reached a point where nothing she did could shock me. But I was wrong. Very wrong. It was 3 days after our confrontation when my phone rang early in the morning. The name flashing across the screen stopped me mid-sip of my coffee. Cheryl, my cousin on my mother's side. She rarely called. If anything, we exchanged polite holiday texts and occasional condolences when an elderly relative passed. So when she called at 7:14 a.m., I knew it wasn't good news. Brooklyn, she said as soon as I answered, her voice tight. I need to tell you something before it gets out of hand. My heart sank. What now? It's your mother. She's been telling everyone that you're financially supporting her. Like, fully supporting her. Bills, food, medical, everything. I pressed my fingers to my temple. Of course she is. No, it gets worse. Cheryl lowered her voice as if Gloria were standing next to her. She's planning to claim you as her dependent. I nearly dropped my mug. What? She thinks it'll help her qualify for certain benefits. She's telling people that you already gave her permission. I had to sit down. My legs simply gave out. Claiming me as her dependent was not just ridiculous, it was legally dangerous. A lie on official benefits paperwork could lead to investigations, penalties, or worse. And if my name was anywhere on anything she submitted, the thought made my skin crawl. Cheryl, I never said any such thing, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I figured, she replied. It sounded strange. That's why I wanted to warn you. I thanked her and hung up, then sat in silence, letting the information crash over me like a wave too large to swim through. Gloria wasn't just rewriting reality. She was building a legally traceable fantasy in which I was her financial caretaker. If she put that on official records, my name could get pulled into whatever audit or investigation followed. I went to the drawer where I had stored the tax notices I'd found. The papers crackled as I spread them out across my kitchen counter. One envelope I hadn't examined closely the first time caught my eye. In the corner, printed in red ink, were the words, Final Warning. Final. Nothing about that word ever meant small. The letter dated from months earlier, stating that if immediate action wasn't taken, further enforcement measures would begin. I noticed something I had missed before. A paragraph explaining that accounts associated with her name could be subject to review if she attempted to open new credit lines or altered her financial status. Was that why she wanted access to my business account? Was she planning to use me as her shield? Fear curled itself around my ribs, steady, cold, patient. I needed protection, legal protection, financial protection, emotional protection. Whatever flimsy loyalties I'd clung to before no longer mattered. This wasn't about boundaries. This was survival. So I made another call. This time, not to an accountant, but to a tax professional specializing in fraud, misuse, and unauthorized filings. A woman named Danielle, whose voice carried that efficient calm of someone who had seen far too much chaos in her career. I explained everything. The joint account papers, the tax notices, the talk of her claiming me as a dependent, the threatening comments, and the growing pattern of desperation. Danielle listened without interrupting, occasionally letting out a quiet sigh that told me she was connecting dots faster than I was. Brooklyn, she finally said, You need to take this very seriously. If she is planning to claim you, or if she already attempted to use your information in any capacity, your name could be flagged during routine checks. Even if I didn't agree to anything? Yes, it wouldn't be your fault, but it could still pull you into the review process, especially if she's behind on taxes. My throat tightened. She's years behind. There was a moment of silence on the line, the kind that carried weight. Then you need to protect yourself immediately, she said. People in severe debt often make impulsive decisions. They drag others in without thinking. Based on what you've described, your mother may already be trying to use your identity as a financial foothold. Anger flared inside me, anger mixed with betrayal and a weary sadness I didn't want to examine too closely. I felt like a child again, realizing something painful. My mother would rather burn everything around her than take responsibility for her own actions. Brooklyn, Danielle continued gently, you mentioned she threatened to take what she deserves. You cannot ignore that. These situations escalate. I leaned against the counter, trying to steady my breath. Everything in me wanted to scream, to cry, to shake, to collapse, but I did none of those things. Instead, I listened. Danielle took a breath. I need to ask you something important. What is it? Do you want to file a formal report? Those words hung in the air, colder than anything I had ever heard, because for the first time, reporting my own mother felt like the safest option I had. When Danielle asked me if I wanted to file a formal report, the room around me felt suddenly too quiet, like the air itself was waiting for my answer. I didn't give one right away. My throat tightened, my pulse thudded in my ears, and for a second I couldn't even hear my own breathing. It wasn't hesitation, not exactly, it was something heavier, something older, loyalty, or rather, the ghost of loyalty that Gloria had conditioned into me from childhood, a loyalty built on guilt, not love. After hanging up with Danielle, I set my phone down and paced my living room, feeling that familiar war between obligation and survival tearing at the inside of my ribs. I had spent decades, my entire adult life, untangling myself from the traps my mother set with her emotional strings. And here I was again, caught between protecting myself and protecting the woman who, on her best days, treated me as a convenient tool, and on her worst, as a financial savior she was entitled to. I sat on the couch and let my mind drift back to the earliest memories I usually kept bolted shut. Gloria, standing in the doorway when I was 9, telling me I owed her for the roof over my head. Gloria crying in front of relatives and pointing at me, saying I didn't appreciate anything she sacrificed. Gloria asking me to lie for her when she didn't want to pay a bill. Gloria insisting I take the blame at school for something she had forgotten to do. Emotional leverage wasn't something she learned late in life. It was her mother tongue. And for so long, I believed her. I believed I was responsible for her happiness, her problems, her disappointments, her bills. It wasn't until I was in my 30s that I realized responsibility was not the same thing as ownership. I could care, but I didn't owe. I could love, but I didn't have to be dragged. Still, that conditioning lingered, like an old injury that aches when storms roll in. Even now, after everything, part of me hated the idea of reporting her. What kind of daughter does that? But another part, a wiser, weathered part, asked, what kind of mother puts her child in this situation? I looked at the tax notices again, the ones she ignored, the ones she tried to hide, the ones she tried to legally tie me. 2. I felt nausea roll through me. If she had already told people she was claiming me as a dependent, what else had she done behind my back? The thought of being dragged into tax evasion, of being legally implicated in her chaos, made my skin crawl. I could lose everything, my business, my savings, my home, my stability, the small, fragile piece I had built around myself like armor. I wasn't going to let her burn down my life just because she refused to take responsibility for hers, so I took out a folder from my desk and began gathering everything. Every document she had brought, every message, every voicemail with manipulative promises and veiled threats, every incident I had written down over the past few weeks. I assembled a timeline, printed screenshots, even wrote out a statement detailing the confrontations we'd had. It felt surreal, building a case against my own mother, but it also felt necessary. Then, while gathering documents, I decided to log into my business account to check for any suspicious activity. My hands trembled slightly as I typed my password. I didn't expect anything unusual until I saw it. A credit check inquiry, under my business address, requested by someone with my mother's last name. I stared at the screen, breath frozen in my lungs. She wasn't just threatening to take what she deserved. She had already started trying. She had attempted to open a credit line with my business information, my livelihood, my financial foundation. That was it. That was the final straw. Not the guilt trips, not the demands, not even the tax notices. It was the realization that she had already crossed the line and left me standing on the edge of a cliff she built. I closed my laptop, picked up the folder of documents, and walked to the kitchen phone with a calmness that surprised me. There was no shaking, no panic, just a quiet certainty, the kind that comes when survival instincts finally override old emotional wounds. I dialed the number Danielle had given me for the tax office. When the automated menu ended and a human voice finally came on the line, I felt that calm settle even deeper. "My name is Brooklyn," I said, "and I need to report potential fraudulent activity. It involves my mother." The agent on the other end asked me for a brief explanation. I told them everything, factually, clearly, without embellishment, without bitterness, just the truth. The truth I had spent too many years avoiding because I didn't want to believe the person who raised me could also ruin me. The agent listened carefully, took notes, and then spoke with a tone that blended professionalism with concern. "All right, Ms. Brooklyn," they said. "We can move forward with an investigation. But before we proceed..." The agent paused, and the hesitation in their voice made my heart thud hard. "We're going to need your mother's full legal name and details." My hand tightened around the phone as I realized I was about to give the information that could change everything, for her and for me. When the agent told me they needed my mother's full legal name and details, a heavy pit formed in my stomach, a slow, dense weight that made it hard to breathe. I stared at the wall in front of me, at nothing and everything at the same time. This was it. This was the moment when hesitation could no longer exist. The moment when survival finally outweighed obligation. The irony didn't escape me. Gloria had spent weeks telling me that sharing was what a good daughter did. You share what you earn. You share what you have. You share everything because I gave you life. Well, I was about to share something, just not the thing she expected. I swallowed hard and reached for the stack of documents I'd gathered. My fingers brushed over the overdue notices, the credit inquiry printouts, the messages she'd sent, proof of what she had tried to do, proof of what she had already done, proof of what she was capable of. "Ms. Brooklyn?" the agent prompted gently. "Take your time. But whenever you're ready, we'll need the information." Ready. What a strange word for a moment like this. But I nodded, even though they couldn't see me, and forced my voice to steady. "I have it here." I read off her full legal name, her date of birth, her current home address, the one she had nearly lost before asking me for money. Then the notice numbers, each stamped with red warnings that felt like alarms going off in my chest. The agent typed quickly, pausing only to confirm a spelling or verify a number. When I finished, I exhaled shakily, realizing I had been holding my breath through most of it. "Thank you," the agent said finally. "I know this can be emotionally difficult, but you're doing the responsible thing. You're protecting yourself, and honestly, you're giving our office information that needed to be reported. Responsible." I let the words settle inside me, even though part of me wanted to cry, scream, or crumble. But another part, the one that had been ignored for too many years, recognized something else. Freedom. It was faint, barely there, but it pulsed in my chest like the quiet flicker of a flame trying to grow. "I just don't want any of this to come back on me," I whispered. "It won't," the agent assured me. "You've done the right thing by notifying us early. We'll flag your information as protected, and we'll investigate her filings to determine the extent of the issue." Investigate. That word felt like a steel door closing behind me, and at the same time, like another door opening somewhere ahead. The agent then told me what precautions I needed to take: change all my account passwords, freeze my credit temporarily, set up identity monitoring, contact my bank to alert them of attempted unauthorized inquiries, and never, under any circumstances, sign anything Gloria brought me. I wrote down every instruction, my hand moving automatically, even as my mind drifted in and out of focus. The pit in my stomach wasn't gone, but it had shifted. Less fear, more inevitability. This was happening. There was no undoing it now. And in a strange, unfamiliar way, I didn't want to undo it. After the call ended, I set the phone on the table and stood in the middle of my kitchen, letting silence fill the space around me. For the first time in my adult life, I had drawn a line my mother couldn't step over. One enforced not by guilt or emotional begging, but by law. I thought about all the years I'd cleaned up after her chaos, all the times I'd stepped in to smooth things over, to fix what she broke, to absorb the consequences so she wouldn't have to. And here I was, finally refusing to be the shield she hid behind. Guilt fluttered in my chest like a trapped bird, but it wasn't alone. Something else was there too, something that felt like oxygen after years of breathing smoke. Relief, because I wasn't betraying her. I was saving myself. Still, I knew my mother. I knew what she would say. I knew how she would twist this. I knew how she would weaponize every ounce of history between us. I braced myself for the fallout, for the confrontation that would inevitably come. I didn't know when, I didn't know how, but I knew it was coming. I spent the rest of the day implementing every precaution the agent had recommended, calling my bank, placing holds, updating passwords, scanning through old emails for anything suspicious. I felt like I was untangling a web she had spun carefully, hoping I wouldn't notice until it was too late. By evening, exhaustion hit me like a physical force. I poured myself a glass of water, sat down on the couch, and closed my eyes, just for a moment that didn't last, because a loud, furious pounding rattled my front door. I jumped, heart racing, and the sound came again, harder, angrier, unmistakably familiar. I didn't need to look through the peephole to know who it was. Gloria had found out something, and she was at my door, furious enough to make the walls vibrate. The pounding on my door didn't stop, not even for a breath. Each hit rattled the wood like Gloria was trying to break through it with sheer outrage. For a moment, I considered pretending I wasn't home, but that wasn't reality anymore. Avoidance was how she won. Silence was how she controlled me. And I wasn't going back to that life. When I opened the door, she was standing there with a crumpled letter in her hand, one I instantly recognized as a government notice. Her face was a shade of furious I had only seen a few times before in my life, the kind that made her eyes narrow and her jaw tighten until her teeth practically clicked together. "You!" she spat. "You did this to me." I didn't answer right away. Her rage was so thick I could almost feel it in the air between us. She waved the letter, inches from my face. "They're investigating me," she screamed. "Do you have any idea what kind of humiliation this is? What kind of betrayal?" There it was, the inevitable word, betrayal, the one she always used when she wanted to turn her mistakes into my sins. "Mom," I said calmly, "I didn't do anything to you. You did this to yourself." Her voice rose even higher. "Don't you dare speak to me like that. I am your mother. I raised you. I sacrificed for you. I gave you everything you have." She had never given me everything. She hadn't even given me the basics without resentment. But I didn't let myself be baited. "You put me in danger," I said firmly. "You tried to access my business account. You told people you were claiming me as a dependent. You tried to open credit under my address. You didn't pay your taxes for years, Mom. I didn't make you do any of that." Gloria's face twisted, outrage turning into a theatrical display of wounded indignation. "You owe me. You wouldn't even have a life if it weren't for me. I brought you into this world, and this is how you repay me? By selling me out to strangers?" Her voice became so loud it echoed off the neighborhood homes. I could see a curtain shift in the window across the street. Someone was listening. "You didn't give me life so you could take mine from me," I said quietly. "You tried to drag me down with you. I won't let that happen." "You think you're so righteous," she snapped. "You think you're better than me? You're nothing without me. You were always nothing until I pushed you." Her accusations hit like old echoes I used to believe, until I didn't anymore. "Mom, I'm not falling for this," I said. "Not this time." She froze for half a second, and in that moment I saw it, uncertainty, a flicker of something like realization. Maybe for the first time in her life, she understood that her words weren't hooks anymore. They weren't ropes she could pull to drag me back. They were empty, blunt, without power. "You've manipulated me for years," I continued. "You've guilted me, blamed me, used me, lied to me. But I'm done. I won't let you control me, and I won't let you ruin my life just because you won't take responsibility for your own." She balled the letter in her fist. "You ungrateful girl. You are turning your back on your own family." "No," I said. "I'm protecting myself from someone who refuses to act like family." Her mouth opened, ready to unleash another explosion, but she didn't get the chance. A voice called out from the sidewalk. "Is everything okay over here?" We both turned. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell, standing with her phone in her hand, concern etched all over her face. She wasn't alone. Two other neighbors hovered behind her, alert and watching. Before I could respond, Gloria shouted, "This is none of your business." But it was already too late. Mrs. Caldwell had seen enough. "I already called the police," she said. "They should be here any minute." Gloria spun toward me with disbelief, then panic. "You let them call the police? On your own mother?" I shook my head. "I didn't ask them to, but you're screaming in the middle of the neighborhood." Within minutes, a patrol car pulled up, lights flashing silently. Two officers approached, one speaking to the neighbors, the other stepping toward me and Gloria. "Ma'am," he said to Gloria, "we received a disturbance call. We need to ask both of you to calm down." Gloria launched into a rehearsed tirade, pointing at me as if I were a criminal. "She's trying to ruin my life. She's reporting me. She's tearing this family apart." The officer listened with a neutral expression, then nodded for me to step aside with him. As soon as we were a few feet away, his voice softened. "Ma'am, I need to ask you something privately." I braced myself. "Do you want her removed from the property?" His question hung in the air like a lifeline and a breaking point, forcing me to choose what kind of daughter I would be from this moment on. When the officer asked if I wanted Gloria removed from my property, something inside me paused, an almost physical catching of breath. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was the weight of decades pressing against a single decision. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I told him what had actually happened, carefully and without the slightest embellishment. I explained how she had pounded on my door, how she had screamed at me, how she had waved a government notice in my face, blaming me for consequences she created herself, how she had tried to force her way into my finances, how she had threatened to take what she deserved, and how this confrontation wasn't an isolated moment, but the culmination of a long, exhausting pattern I had survived for years. The officer listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, his expression neither judgmental nor pitying, just attentive. When I finished, he exhaled slowly. "You've been dealing with a lot," he said, "and you have every right to protect your home and your peace. You're not obligated to tolerate this behavior, even if she's family." Those words struck deeper than he could have known. Even if she's... For so long, family had been the rope she wrapped around my neck whenever she wanted to pull me back. Hearing someone in authority say I wasn't required to endure it felt like a weight slipping off my shoulders. "I don't want her arrested," I said quietly. "I just want her to leave." He nodded. "We can do that." The officers walked back toward Gloria, who was pacing in small, furious circles like a storm that couldn't decide where to strike next. When they told her she needed to leave the property immediately and not return without my explicit invitation, her face twisted with outrage. "She's my daughter," she shouted. "You can't keep me from my own daughter's home." "It's her home," the officer replied firmly. "Not yours, and she has asked you to leave." Gloria looked at me then, really looked at me, as if she were seeing a stranger wearing her daughter's face. There was disbelief in her expression, but also something else, something like fear. Or maybe it was realization, though I doubted she'd ever admit it. "This isn't over," she hissed before turning away. She stormed down the walkway and into her car, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. The engine roared to life, and she tore out of the driveway, leaving behind a cloud of dust and the faint echo of all the years she had held over me like a sentence. When the officers left, I closed the door, turned the lock, and just stood there, staring at the wood grain as silence finally settled back over my home. The quiet felt foreign, almost unreal, like I had stepped into a version of my life I had never truly experienced before. I sank onto the couch, my legs barely cooperating, and let out a long, shaky breath. I felt sadness. Of course I did. She was my mother. Even now, even after everything, a piece of me mourned the relationship we never had, but always pretended existed. But woven into that sadness was something warm, fragile, and astonishingly new. Relief. A relief so pure it made my eyes sting. I had protected myself. I had stood firm. I had refused to be dragged under the weight of her demands and manipulations, and for the first time in decades, I felt free. That night, I made myself a simple dinner and ate in the kind of quiet that didn't feel oppressive or lonely, but peaceful. I slept better than I had in months, deeply, uninterrupted, without the familiar knot of anxiety tightening my chest. Over the next few days, I focused on rebuilding the parts of my life she had tried to infiltrate. I updated every password. I called my bank again to double-check security measures. I froze my credit. I filed official notes on my accounts warning of unauthorized access attempts. I reorganized my records and made copies of every document related to the investigation. Each step, small as it was, stitched strength back into me. I even revised my legal documents, my will, my beneficiaries, my contacts, ensuring there was no path she could slip through. It wasn't vindictive, it was protective, it was necessary. And with each action, each phone call, each update, I felt the grip she'd held over me for nearly 6 decades loosen. It was like I'd spent my entire adult life holding my breath without realizing it, and only now was I finally inhaling fully. For the first time, I didn't feel like a child trying to placate a storm. I felt like a woman choosing herself, and choosing myself felt powerful. Right. Necessary. One evening, about a week after she'd come to my door, I walked to my mailbox, expecting nothing more than catalogs and utility bills. But mixed into the stack was an envelope addressed to me, from the same government office handling the investigation. My heart stuttered. I held it for a long moment, the edges pressing into my fingers, before finally turning it over in my hands. The letter was thick, and whatever was inside would tell me exactly what the investigation had uncovered about my mother. I carried the thick envelope back into the house like it was made of glass. My hands trembled, not out of fear, but out of the gravity of everything it represented. This letter held the weight of the last few months, the truth I had been bracing myself for, and the final confirmation of whether I had escaped the fallout of my mother's choices. I sat at the dining table, placed the envelope in front of me, and let myself breathe. Just once. Deep and steady. Then I slid my thumb under the seal and opened it. The first page began with formal language, dense paragraphs, citations of regulations, procedural notes. But my eyes went straight to the lines that mattered. The investigation had concluded. My mother, Gloria, had years of unpaid taxes, missed filings, and ignored notifications. The debt had accumulated with penalties, interest, and enforcement measures long overdue. The most jarring part was how far back the issue went, long before she ever showed up demanding money from me. Then came the line that made my lungs finally release the breath I'd been holding. You have been found to bear no involvement or liability in the taxpayer's outstanding obligations. Officially cleared, legally protected, free. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the words sink into me like sunlight breaking through clouds. All the fear, the tension, the dread of being dragged into her mess. It melted, piece by piece, replaced by something calmer, steadier. Relief. The next pages detailed the consequences Gloria now faced. Enforced repayment plans, penalties, mandatory financial reviews, and the possibility of further action if she attempted to submit false information again. It was a long list, one entirely built by her own decisions. None of it surprised me. What did surprise me was how matter-of-factly it all felt. The world hadn't collapsed. I hadn't betrayed her. I hadn't destroyed anything. She had created the storm on her own. I sat there turning the pages slowly, my fingers brushing the black and white words that spelled out a truth I had always sensed but never fully accepted. I couldn't save my mother from herself. No one could. The only person she had ever been running from was her own irresponsibility. and the only person she had ever been chasing for a rescue was me. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling, letting a strange, steady calm settle into my chest. For the first time in years, I wasn't tangled in her chaos. I wasn't bracing for the next crisis. I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was free. But freedom didn't erase the ache. I still felt sadness, deep and raw, for what could have been. If she had chosen responsibility sooner, if she had chosen honesty instead of manipulation, if she had chosen growth instead of blame, none of this would have happened. It wasn't the taxes that ruined her life. It was denial. It was entitlement. It was the refusal to ever look inward. I folded the letter back into its envelope and placed it gently on the table. Then I realized something important. I needed to choose myself now, not just in crisis, but in healing. So I made the decision I had avoided for years. I reached out to a therapist, someone who specialized in family trauma and emotional manipulation, someone who could help me untangle the knots my mother left in my mind, my confidence, and my heart. It felt like reclaiming a part of myself I had forgotten I was allowed to have. Over the next few weeks, life settled into a quiet rhythm, a rhythm without Gloria's demands echoing through it. I slept without checking my phone at night. I drank my coffee without dread curling in my stomach. I worked on my business with a clear mind instead of fear whispering in the background. And for the first time in my 57 years, I felt proud, not for achieving something, not for surviving something, but for choosing myself, for breaking the cycle that had chained the women in my family to guilt and obligation for generations, for walking away from the emotional trap I'd been taught to call love. I didn't ruin my mother's life. I simply refused to let her ruin mine. But even as I settled into this new peace, there was still one truth I couldn't ignore. One loose thread the story hadn't tied up. Gloria wasn't someone who accepted consequences quietly. She wasn't someone who looked inward. And she certainly wasn't someone who let go of a grudge. As I placed the envelope in a drawer and turned off the kitchen light, a thought flickered through me. Soft, uneasy, but honest. I had finally chosen myself. But what would my mother do now that she could no longer use me as her escape? In the end, I didn't destroy my mother's life. I simply stepped out of the path she kept dragging me into. The investigation forced her to face the very consequences she spent years ignoring, while I finally tasted the peace I'd been denied for most of my adulthood. Breaking away wasn't easy, but choosing myself was the first decision that truly felt like freedom. And now looking back, I realize survival sometimes means letting the truth speak louder than loyalty. But tell me this. If someone you love tried to pull you into their downfall, would you walk away or would you let them take you with them? If stories like this make you think about the quiet battles so many of us carry alone, then stay close. You're not the only one trying to rise above old wounds. Every shared voice keeps this channel alive, and every connection we build helps another person feel less alone in their struggle. So if this story stayed with you, lean in, stay with us, and don't forget to keep the conversation going.